So it's really lovely to, not that I can see you all, but it's really lovely to see you all and to know that you're all here. Let's hopefully use that chat this afternoon, have a chat with each other, say where you're from, promote yourselves, look for partners, just do that little bit of shout out, you know, connect with people who you think work in the same area as you. We've just had some Welsh members and Welsh stakeholders talking to each other. Pronounce that to you all. So everybody, you're really, really welcome here with us this afternoon. I'm going to do some housekeeping first, and then I'm going to welcome properly. And then the whole afternoon is going to be a bit of a blur tonight, I'm sure. So I need to do a little bit of housekeeping. So obviously it is a Zoom-based conference, so there's a few extra things that we might need to do. The first thing we're going to ask you to do is answer a poll. It's not a proper quiz, but we're going to put a poll up to ask if we have permission to share your details with other delegates. Now at a Clinks conference, that's really important because you will meet people or connect with people or hear from people the next few days who could be the best partner you've never had until now. So we want to pop those details up for you. That's going to come. We're going to ask you to do that. Everybody do it when it comes on your screen, please. For the best viewing experience for you, there you go, just doing the poll. For the best viewing experience for you, on the right-hand side of your screen, it says view. If you click that and you pick on speaker, then you will see who's speaking. If you want to go into gallery later on, when there's lots of opportunities for Q&A, you might want to do that. But the poll disappeared before people could answer. Could that possibly go back up? Thanks very much, Abby, for letting us know. Sorry about that. Fingers on your buzzers, as they say. We don't want to see those fingers. The other thing that will be useful for you is if you turn off, if you mute when you're not speaking, then it's the best audio experience for you, but also for others. Some people have dogs, some people have noisy neighbours, some people have all sorts of stuff going on in the background. So if you can mute your sound, that would be really helpful to others, particularly people who might struggle to hear and might have difficulties. We want people to be able to access this conference as well as possible in this kind of format. Feel free to use the chat function, as I said, to say where you're from. It's given me the warm fuzzies. I don't know about everybody else. Introduce yourselves, connect with each other. Thoughts and reflections throughout the presentations. Also, for the chat function, there are a few times this afternoon we're going to have Q&As. And when we do that, if we could use the chat function solely for asking questions, please. And that is so we don't miss anyone's question. It's really difficult, it's much more challenging to get people's questions than it is when we're able to make ourselves known, hands up, standing up, or just shouting out in a physical conference. So what we're going to ask today, if you put in capital letters in the chat question, when you have a question, the team will filter those over to me. You will see possibly Clinks staff looking away and on phones or whatever. We're not online shopping. We are using MS Teams to run the conference backstage. So we'll be getting the questions will be coming through to me. So if you put those in capital letters, that would be great. In the unlikely event that you drop out of the event today through Wi-Fi connections or whatever, and you have problems getting in, email events@clinks.org. That mailbox is being monitored the whole time and somebody will help you get back in. If the meeting drops out, so if the conference falls offline, give us a minute to restart and then you can rejoin with the links that you have already. And this has never happened to us and hopefully it wouldn't. But if we have uninvited Zoom intruders, then we will stop the meeting immediately to keep everyone safe. We will resend a new joining list, a new joining link then to everybody who's registered. So in the unlikely event that that happens, go to your email, we'll send you a new link. The old link won't work. Okay, anybody got any questions about housekeeping? Just to say, over the next few days, you have different links for the different sessions. For this afternoon, we stay on this one link, but tomorrow and Thursday, I'm forgetting the days of the week. Tomorrow and Thursday, there are different links for your different workshops. So it should all be in your email. Any queries over the next few days, events@clinks.org. I'm also going to apologise because I reckon, because I had the 3 months off, and I just want to thank everybody for your lovely messages from me, Jack and Mary. But also went to Ireland for the summer. Apparently, I'm even less understandable than normal. and I talk even faster. It could be useful for timekeeping, but it might also be difficult. So if at any time I say something that's a bit colloquial or a bit fast, just ask me, because I love talking. So I'll say it again. So we are going to get on with the show, and what a show we have for you over the next few days. And massive thanks to the Klinks team and to the people who are putting together the workshops for us. We know none of you really have time for this. So what we've tried to do over the next few days is make a conference that speaks to the very important issues, that gives space for reflection, for learning, for connection, so that basically you recharge your batteries, you fill your tank, and you're ready for whatever's coming next, whatever could be coming next. I have to say, personally, if anybody has the land of a TARDIS or DeLorean, I would very happily go back in time and wipe the last year from history. And maybe some of you feel like that as well. What we are hoping is by the end of the next 3 days, you won't feel like that. You'll feel fit and ready. You'll feel recharged. You'll feel energized. You'll remember what it's like to connect with others in the sector. You'll pick up new ideas, or maybe you'll share with others that others are having the same challenges as you, and you won't feel so alone. So whatever it is, I hope you get what you came for. The format is in these short workshops, all online, and thank you so much to people who have put those together for us. We have a lovely range of themes and topics, interactivity, yoga, all sorts of brilliant stuff. So the format hopefully is in a way that you can contribute and you can take part. The reason we're doing it in this way is because of the year, and that, you know, the last 18 months that we've all had. It's been really tough. So obviously the elephant in the room, not least because I'm still in my box room 18 months or longer later, is that COVID, you know, is still having such an impact on the way that the sector works. And in order to come together, this is probably still the best way for us to do that. Because even if COVID itself and, you know, restrictions aren't stopping people from getting out and about, the time that we all need to commit to things means that it's very difficult to find the kind of time that we need for the development and the connection that you get from a national conference. But you've had a very, very challenging year. COVID has really pushed organisations to the nth degree, but you continue to innovate, you continue to inspire, and most importantly, you continue to meet people's needs and give them what they need and deserve. Probation, dare I say it, has undergone huge changes, and we in the last year you've seen the probation reform programme move from policy into practice and into implementation. Many of you are currently bidding for work and starting to deliver on those contracts. And we've got probation at Klinks.org, their dedicated mailbox set up for anybody who has any questions about any of that work. We've had sentencing reforms. We've had the police crime and sentencing bill, and we've had a lot of challenges for those of you working with people in prison, not only through COVID and their families on the outside, but also now as we recover into prison reform, and we have a white paper coming. So we're going to hear more about some of these things in the next few minutes from our key speaker. You've also had year-on-year funding challenges that have become much more pertinent in the last year in COVID. You've continued to find what you need so that you can give people what they need and deserve. And in all of that, service user need has continued to increase. And service user need has continued to be more complex. People have found it much more difficult to get the things that they need because of the impact of the pandemic on wider services. So you are never more needed. And we are here every step of the way to give you what you need to help people get what they need. I really hope that you enjoy the next few days. I really hope that they help you to remember that you can do it and you do it every day, and that this organisation is here to help you. Klinks is your organisation, and we hope that we will continue to help you, to help the people who need you so very much. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to our keynote speaker, because our format today is we're going to have a keynote speaker and a Q&A session. So if you've got questions from that during the session, you put them in the chat box question. Anything you don't put question in capitals, we will assume is a remark or a reflection. And after that, we'll have a panel. we'll have the AGM and then we'll have a panel. So myself and Roma will kind of pivot on different chair duties today, but I'm going to introduce you now to Matt Gray, who is Executive Director for Reducing Reoffending Partnerships and Accommodation at HMPPS, Prison and Probation Service. And we're delighted to have Matt here today because his team, I won't steal his thunder, but the teams that work in Matt's directorate have a lot of interactions with the voluntary sector and focus a lot about how the voluntary sector works with the rest of the system. So we're excited to hear from Matt today and to hear what you have to say to me. So Matt, are you there? It's my Davina.
I am here. Can you hear me? Now?
Goodness. Yes, loud and clear. So I'm going to go on mute for a change, and I'll hand over to you.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thanks very much, Anne. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to come and speak to you at your AGM today. As Anne said, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Gray. I'm the Executive Director for Reducing Reoffending Partnerships and Accommodation here at HMPPS. I'm covering Hannah Meyer while she's on maternity leave for the next year. So it's great to be able to come and speak to you in my first few weeks in the role. And I can safely say that I think I have the best job in HMPPS because my job is to galvanise efforts across HMPPS, MOJ, government and partner organisations to cut crime, reducing reoffending and help prison leavers make a success of their lives. That's why I joined public service, and I think it's my absolute privilege to have the chance to really drive the agency's focus on achieving better outcomes for the people in our charge. I'm also here today because from this month, I'm also the sponsor for HMPPS' relationship with the third sector. So I wanted to take this opportunity to come and say hello and to talk to you about our approach to reducing reoffending. I want to talk about how much the crucial role of the third sector matters to HMPPS. And I also wanted to make sure that I take the time to emphasise my commitment towards the opportunity we have as equal partners to achieve our shared aims and aspirations. So I fundamentally believe the third sector, collectively, is an absolutely essential part of the HMPPS. The 1,700 voluntary organisations that work in the criminal justice system play a central role in helping people in our care to make a success of their lives and a positive contribution in society. So the first thing I want to say to all of you who've attended the call is thank you. Your contribution is right at the heart of the better outcomes we all want to achieve for people in the system. And without your efforts, we collectively wouldn't achieve half of what we must do to make a difference. And in particular, I wanted to say thank you on behalf of everyone at HMPPS for everything you've done over the past few years. COVID has been devastatingly tough on all of us and on our ability to keep the wheels on the road. I could devote my entire speech to praising you for all the work you've done, but I want to use this time to talk about the future. So I'll just say again, thank you for all your efforts, your sacrifices, your adaptability and your resilience. I really hope you find time to reflect on what you've managed to achieve over this period, not just think about some of the challenges you've had to overcome. But as I said, I want to turn to the future. Reducing reoffending is an absolute priority for the government. Around 80% of people who receive cautions or convictions have offended before. So if we're going to cut crime, make communities safer and prevent victims, we really need to tackle reoffending. And within government, I want to talk to you about our two-step approach. The first step is about robust monitoring the community. We're expanding electronic monitoring and sobriety tags, as well as working with the police and wider partners to focus on the prevention of neighbourhood crime. But we also need to tackle the drivers of reoffending. So our second step is to improve the rehabilitation and resettlement support that prisoners receive both in custody and after release. You will all know as well as I that people who leave prison with strong foundations in place to make a success of their lives are less likely to reoffend. Among other things, that means having a stable home, a steady job, and good health free from substance misuse. And I'm going to talk about each of those three areas. Turning first to a stable home. We've developed a community accommodation service so that people leaving prison can access suitable housing. Oops, sorry, my lights are going. It brings together approved premises and bail accommodation and support services with a new tier of support, transitional accommodation. This new transitional accommodation scheme was launched in July for 5 probation regions, and it provides transitional housing for prison leavers who would otherwise be homeless upon release. That helps provide stability as they re-enter the community and provides an absolute rock solid foundation for all the wider support they need. And then in approved premises, we're also delivering 200 new spaces. That's an increase in capacity of 10% over the next couple of years, alongside a really major program of upgrades to the existing estate, which has been something much needed for a long time. Next, looking at a steady job. The New Futures Network, which is a specialist part of HMPPS, which brokers partnerships between prisons and employers, is generating hundreds of job opportunities every month. But we know there's more that needs to be done. The Deputy Prime Minister has made clear his desire for what he's described as a quantum leap in getting more prison leavers into employment. That means, as well as working with ever greater numbers of employers, we're also trying to improve procedures to get prison leavers job ready, to ensure they have the practical things they need on release. But we also, if we're going to get prison leavers into work, need to lead by example. So that's why the Civil Service has pledged to hire 1,000 ex-offenders by the end of 2023. I know that many charities and VCSE groups also lead from the front here. Education and training are also key to employability. Work to create a new prison education service is progressing well. Our vision is that everyone who's of working age and able to work should leave prison prepared for employment or further education and training. We really want to establish a golden thread of learning, skills development, and progress through a custodial sentence, helping prisoners prepare for life on release and fulfill their potential. And then finally, good health free from substance misuse. Continuity of care as offenders move from prison to probation is crucial to ensure they access the right treatment. This is a critical period of increased risk, not just of reoffending, but of relapse and associated health concerns. That's why an extra £80 million is being invested in drug treatment services this year to give more support to offenders with addictions. This will allow local authorities to commission important additional services in a way that best meets local needs. And it will allow HMPPS to work closely with DHSC and the NHS on that work. But at the same time, we know that many third sector partners are also on the front line of this work locally, and we're looking forward to working with you on it as well. But there's more. So we know there's much more involved in reducing reoffending than just those three areas, whether that be supported with mental health issues, family problems, or deep trauma. And we also know there's many VCSE bodies out there who focus on other areas of support. And to you, I want to say your contribution is equally valued, equally important. Please keep doing what you're doing, because it's not just about focusing on these three areas. It's about focusing on every single thing that we need to really address all the causes of reducing reoffending. And I at HMPPS want to work with you and really take advantage of what you can offer in these areas. And my job is to try to continue it to enable you to have the best impact you can wherever you work in the system. So as we're focusing on these three areas, though, we're also testing ways to innovate and do things differently. My team runs a Reducing Reoffending Accelerator project, which is up and running in 16 prisons. That tests new ways to improve the support for prisoners and prison leavers across employment, accommodation, education, and substance misuse. We've recruited nearly 40 new staff across those prisons to test new approaches. Their work's already showing results. For example, a hospitality recruitment drive in 7 prisons generated around 70 job offers in just a 2-week period earlier this month. Another example of things we're doing is the £20 million Prison Leavers Project, which launched a grant funding scheme earlier this year. That scheme aims to empower local leaders and agencies to improve the join-up of services and find innovative ways to work together and reduce reoffending their local communities. Looking ahead, I don't want innovation to start and end in my own team, though, or in HMPPS. And I'm really eager to harness the great thoughts and innovation from the third sector, as you have huge amounts of brilliant new ideas. But it's not just about innovation and brilliant new ideas. We also need to do more of what works well. And many of the organisations who I'm no doubt speaking to today and who work with Clinks provide tried and tested, bespoke, focused support that's been making a big difference for many, many years. And as much as we talk about innovation, we also need to focus on that and not lose sight of that work. In fact, we really want to embrace it. Where you are doing great things, I want to help to try and shine a light on those successes. Where you're doing things that really work, I want you to look at how we can do more of it and talk to us about how we can do more of it. To help us do all of this, in October's spending review, the government set out how to build on the investment in prison leaver rehabilitation announced earlier this year. By 2024-25, the government will be investing an additional £200 million a year to improve prison leavers' access to accommodation, employment support, and substance misuse treatment, as well as further measures for early intervention to tackle youth offending. £200 million a year is an incredible amount of additional investment in this area and gives us a genuine opportunity to really transform the landscape and driving down rates of reoffending. And I'm really looking forward to working with you as part of that. I just wanted to dwell for a minute on probation reform, because that's been one of the biggest changes this year. The third sector sits at the heart of all the work to ensure the recently unified probation service works. Around 2/3 of the day one contracts for commissioned rehabilitative services were awarded to the voluntary sector. And those contracts are just the start of commissioning services to support rehabilitation and resettlement of people on probation. And we're learning lessons from those competitions to make sure that the next set we do even better. We've really welcomed the valuable contributions made by Richard Oldfield in his report on the dynamic framework and agree with much of what it contains. Its ambition to promote further use of grants, to encourage the involvement of small and medium-sized organisations, and to simplify the competition process. We're going to continue to work through how we can implement those recommendations. We've also recently established the Third Sector Strategic Partnership Board. That includes senior civil servants, Clinks, and other representatives from the sector. And as the incoming sponsor for that board, I'm genuinely excited about the opportunities to use it as a real place to drive the conditions needed for voluntary organisations to play an ever greater role in reducing reoffending. I know that working with Klinks, we use that board to make sure that as many organisations in the system have a real voice at the table. I also wanted to touch on the work being done to improve diversity and inclusion. I know this has been a real focus for the sector in recent months and years, and it's something HMPPS is also committed to. Diversity and inclusion, as you know, isn't just about doing the right thing, and it makes business sense. People's experience of the justice system can really vary depending on their ethnicity, gender, disability, or other characteristics. And so making the system more diverse and more inclusive will help us offer more targeted support to different groups. Staff will be much better equipped to help offenders rehabilitate, whatever their background, ultimately helping to reduce reoffending and cut crime. And it's an area where and diversity and inclusion is an area where we need to work particularly closely with you. Over the next 2 years, our race action plan will seek to create a much more diverse and inclusive workforce, giving all our staff an opportunity to be their best. And consultation with voluntary sector partners was at the heart of the development of that programme. Prisoners, children, and people on probation are a really important focus for that programme, which will tackle disparity in outcomes to reduce reoffending and enhance rehabilitative practices. And we've made funding available through the Stewardship Fund to support that. In 2020-21, £1.5 million is invested to support the development of third sector organisations that led by and focus on services for ethnic minority people and communities. And the grants programme gives us an opportunity to expand our work with partners. In particular, we're seeking to improve outcomes for people with protected characteristics. For example, the Zahid Mubarak Trust is testing and delivering a prisoner equality advocates project to improve outcomes for Black, Asian, minority ethnic individuals, particularly young adults in custody and after release. Sign Health is improving awareness of the needs of deaf people in the criminal justice system. And as I said, we're putting HMPPS at the forefront of the civil service and employing people with lived experience to ensure their unique and really invaluable insights can help formulate better policy and deliver services more effectively. I'm sorry about the lights. But it's crucial that we continue to listen to you, drawing on your access to first-hand insights and community connections, and we'll keep doing that with you over the coming years. So we've got this really ambitious and far-reaching programme of work underway, but we can't do this alone, and we need to work with a whole range of partners to achieve all these shared ambitions. The third sector has a really long and proud history of working with people in prison and on probation, and you've got a unique and essential role to play as we focus on the themes of accommodation, employment, education, and substance misuse. In education, the Shannon Trust, for example, has recently run an extremely successful prison literacy programme. Their peer-led programme, Turning Pages, has helped over 600 learners improve their literacy since it started in 2015. In 2015, the Clinks charity, which trains prisoners in professionally run kitchens, has already helped over 2,500 offenders into stable jobs over the last decade. Prisoners who've taken part in that training scheme are almost a third less likely to go on to commit further offences. Another example is Code 4000, who have set up 2 tech academies to train prisoners in software development and supported them to get a job on release. None of the learners participating in that programme has reoffended to date, and every graduate is engaging in some form of positive activity after leaving the academy. And then in substance misuse, No Place Productions will launch a drama-based project next year in prisons to explore the use of spice and other psychoactive substances. That project will focus on how this affects prisoners' well-being, mental health, relationships with family and significant others. And those are just a really, really small handful of examples of your fantastic work that helps to reduce reoffending by providing prisoners with the support they need to make a success of their lives. And beyond the lens of reducing reoffending, there are many, many more third sector partners who work on other issues and whose contributions are equally valued. And I'm sorry we haven't got time to spend my entire time listing those today. And it's at this point I want to pay a particular note of thanks to Klinks, because of course at HMPPS we're really proud to work with all of the team at Klinks, because they help play a crucial role helping to bring your voice to the table nationally, so we can ensure the work you're doing informs our overall strategy for rehabilitation and reducing offending. But they also play a really key role locally, helping surface the work you do so we know how to make the most of it through their comprehensive communications programme and through all of their engagement with local delivery partners. And over the coming years, I just want to say I'm really excited by the work we can do with you directly and in partnership with Klinks, who will no doubt continue to strive for you to keep you as informed and engaged as possible in this work. So my thanks to Anne and her team for their ongoing work there. So in finishing, I just wanted to say that I believe this is a really significant moment. We have a multi-year funding settlement that provides genuinely transformational investment. By working together constructively, we've got the opportunity to shift the dial on reducing reoffending. That means we all need to focus on delivery that has a really genuine impact, to be innovative, to continue to do what works really well, and to continue to address issues such as diversity, inclusion, and performance. So I'll end by saying my ask of you is that you keep working with us, keep sharing your ideas, and keep challenging us to improve. My pledge to you is that we'll seek to create the conditions that allow the sector to work with us as equal partners over the coming years to achieve those goals. And together, we can build a better future. Thank you very much for everything that you do. Thank you very much for taking time to listen to me, and I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Matt. If anybody wanted to clap on reactions, there is a round of applause. So Matt, thank you very much for that. We're going to go straight to questions because we've got 15 minutes, so we should be able to get quite a few questions in, and we've had quite a few questions in the chat already. So if it's okay, I'm going to take them in a group of 3 at a time and then come to Matt for a response. And I'm going to come to people to ask their question out. If you think, oh, I put it in the chat and it's gone now, I can remind you of it. So we're going to go in order of which they came. This is where I have to go to another format. So the first question we had was from Paul Dance. Paul, are you there?
Yeah, hi, thank you.
Hi.
Hi Matt, I'm a tutor in prison in Cambridgeshire. Just curious to see what changes you think should be made in prison education in order to support all these terrific plans that you've got.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We're going to come back to you, Matt. We're going to take 2 more. Okay. Second question is from Claire Price. Where are you, Claire?
Oh, hi, I'm here. I work in South Wales in Cardiff and the Vale as a partnership integration coordinator. My question was about your transitional accommodation scheme and what the plans are to expand that so it covers the whole of the UK. And also, another question which you may not be able to answer is that are there any plans to have approved premises in Wales for women, because we don't have any.
We're going to go to the northeast. Joe, are you there? Joe Peterson, here's your moment.
Thank you. I'm Joe Peterson from Age UK North Tyneside. I listened to you with interest. I just wondered, as a protected characteristic, whether there's any specific support. We talk a lot about employability for those aged 65 plus, and I think that affects employability, reoffending and accommodation, which have specific needs for that age group. Thank you.
Well, Matt, over to you for a response.
Great, thank you. I'm so sorry, I didn't really catch the second question. Can you just repeat it again, please?
Second question was from Claire. What plans are there to expand the transitional accommodation scheme into other areas? And also, are there plans to open any approved premises for women in Wales?
Yeah, thank you very much. So all really good questions. So on education, I think in terms of what changes, a lot of it is about getting the basics right and making sure that the current education provision works really well. So step one, thinking about how do we recover more from COVID and how do we get people back into learning. We've obviously been doing all sorts of innovative thinking over the course of the COVID crisis about how we provide educational services. We need to take some of that great learning, but also get back into how do we make sure we're running the right lessons and running the right classes. Part of that means just doing more work to improve attendance in prisons, so really giving governors the space and support and the challenge to find more space to kind of drive attendance, much more clearly link up with attendance with opportunities in work afterwards. So we need to kind of make sure we've got the frameworks in place to support governors. We need to make sure we've got the arrangements in place to help provide local education and understand the local provision. We also need to do more to understand the specific needs of people in prison. So one of the things we're looking at through our accelerated prisons is around how we have neurodiversity leads who can help think about the particular needs of those who are neurodiverse. And hopefully we will see those being rolled out more broadly across the estate over the coming years. And then on just widely on the curriculum, the other thing I want to flag is that the Secretary of State is very supportive of making sure that we are really driving work to ensure that the educational support we provide in prisons is really closely tied to opportunities to improve employment upon release. And so we need to think about how we ensure the curriculum enables that. So focusing on literacy and numeracy, but also on providing people with the technical skills that they need to get work, and ideally working with private sector businesses to understand their needs and trying to see how we can translate that back into a learning offer within the prisons. On the second piece on transitional accommodation, we launched transitional accommodation services in 5 Vanguard probation regions back in July. They started bedding well. We've currently got 426 people who would otherwise have been released homeless into that transitional accommodation, which is a huge success only 5 months in. As I said, we've achieved a huge amount of settlement over the coming years through the spending review, and one of the big things which I'm keen to do is to roll that service out nationally. We've still got to work that with ministers to kind of where and when and how we might want to do that, but ideally we will see that coming towards national rollout, and as we understand what options we have to deliver that, I'm hopeful that we can communicate that to you, and I think that will make a huge difference in helping to ensure that people who are released who would otherwise be homeless or who just need some more time to sort out stable accommodations will have that additional support that the bedrock of accommodation offers. On AP in Wales, and women's AP in Wales, so we would love to make sure we've got better provision for approved premises. I think at the moment there's no specific plan for women's AP in Wales, but what I would say is that we've recently just opened our first new approved premises in, I think it's something like 25 years. And that's an independent approved premises in Bristol, which will also serve Wales. So that will hopefully make some impact on the challenges there. But of course, we'll continue to explore all options around how we provide further support across England and Wales. And then the last one was around support for those aged over 65. So I think for all of education, one of the things that we're really trying to do is understand how we provide support across the prison system for all of those in there, about how we support them into employment. We're looking in particular at rolling out employment advisors, which again we have trialled in our in our accelerated prisons, and they've been working really well. They've had a real impact on helping to connect businesses and prison leavers and identify job opportunities. And I think that would be a really important support for everybody at every level, including those aged over 65. Because and the challenge will be making sure that those employment advisors are really making sure they think about diversity, inclusion, and how they have an offer which is supportive of everybody in the prison.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We've got enough time, I think, for 2 more rounds, so we're going to go to the next group. So I've got Daryl, Olivia, and Emily. So Daryl first, please. Daryl Evans.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm a complete novice to this. So apologies if I'm asking a very naive question. I'm here just to learn with a view to becoming more involved as a volunteer. My question was this, that I understood you're establishing home, job, and health as the sort of pillars of helping people rehabilitate. And I was wondering why you didn't place relationships, particularly family relationships, on an equal footing with that.
We will come back for an answer in a minute. Thanks, Darryl. Olivia from Working Chance, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. I just had a question about some of the plans to improve employment prospects for those leaving prison, though my particular interest is in women leaving prison. And I'd like to hear more about the plans that we've been told are in the upcoming white paper for resettlement passports and the local employment boards in prison areas. And on the local employment boards, I'd like to know, like, if they interact or are part of New Futures Network, or if they're a separate thing. And within these two plans, how is the MOJ going to make sure they serve women and respond to women's needs? Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. Emily Giles from the Bell Foundation.
Hi, thanks for that, Matt. My question is around additional barriers faced by people in the system who are speaking English as a second or an additional language. Just interested in what sort of consideration is being given to that with all the brilliant stuff that's going on and across those three pillars. Just interested in what's happening to overcome those barriers for those people.
Great,
Okay,
thank you very much.
Over to you. We might get another round.
And some brilliant questions. So the first question to Darryl on families. So yes, completely agree. Relations to really critical securing assistance. We don't call it out as a specific area of focus, but it's definitely weaved into the many other strands that we're working on. So, for example, involving families or significant others in periods of supervision on probation, to involve them in the work we do to give support, access and substance misuse treatment and accommodation. So it's definitely not an area where we're not looking at, but we're trying to think about how we factor it into our other areas. On employment boards, so yes, New Futures Network have been really key in setting this up. So my thanks to Duncan O'Leary and his team. Duncan's the CEO of New Futures Network, who've been really working hard on that. We've been testing this as part of Accelerated Prisons projects. Those boards, the intention is that they will be at prison level, they'll be chaired by senior business leaders, and they'll help to create an infrastructure for prisons to tap into to ensure that their employment support offer and services are aligned with the local labour market. So we've tested those in 3 prisons, and we're going to expand them across the estate. So in ask of how will it support women, female offenders, women prisoners in particular, what we'd be looking for is we'd be expecting a local employment board for women's prisons, and so they can have specific, so it would be specifically targeted and led by the population in that prison. And then in terms of a specific example, sorry, is that we are doing exactly that in HMP Newhall to trial that, so we can learn about it. And then on English as a second language, I mean, you picked up a really key point there. It is always a challenge. So we're looking at a variety of things of what we can do. So obviously on the healthcare provision, we work very closely with DHSE to try, and they do a lot of work to try to ensure that the healthcare provision is supported by information and guidance in other languages. ESOL is part of our key core curriculum, and so we'll be encouraging prisons to ensure the needs of non-native speakers are met as part of the education provision. We will continue to look at what more we can do to offer support to those who don't speak English as a first language, but you will know that it is always a really tricky thing to understand how we do it. If you've got ideas on how better we support those people, please do let us know.
Brilliant. I think we can get another call in. They're coming in thick and fast now, so the screen's gone a little bit funny. I'm going to take Donna and Sancha, and we'll see if we can get them answers, because I have to hand over for the AGM that has to start at a particular time. But if we get Donna, I'm assuming it's Donna from WIP, Clinks trustee, and then Sancha Allen Jones. So if you could follow on from one another, and then Matt.
Shall I go first? Hello, Matt. I think my question, because I can't actually find it, but I will say what I think it was, is there any plans to relook at the female offender strategy, as our organisation works in trying to reduce offending by utilising women's centres more, and within the female offender strategy, there was a lot of emphasis on the whole system approach and things like that. So I wondered if anybody was going to look at that again and see where we move on there.
Hi, Matt, I'm Sancha. My question was simply, it's been accepted widely now that receiving support from people with lived experience is beneficial, especially if people, coming out of the prisons, etc. Is there being anything done to look at the security clearance process? Because we're still finding that people with lived experience are struggling to get into to deliver either one-to-one or group work in the prisons. So is there going to be a review of this in line with the focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment? Thank you.
Sanchez. So Matt, over to you for those two answers. What I'm going to say to everybody else is there are more questions. If it's okay with you, Matt, we're going to email them over to you, and we'll give you the details of people to get in touch with. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
fine.
fine.
If there's anything that we think it's a general question, we'll find ways to work with you and get those answers out to people.
That's absolutely fine. So please do pass over all the questions, and we'll give you a full response to it.
We definitely have more questions than we have time.
So you can share
okay, over to you, Matt.
Great, thanks. So like I said, please do send us questions over. If you've not had a chance to get to them today, we'll make sure you get answers to all the questions. I'm sure my team will thank me enormously for that. So on female offenders, so completely recognise that is an area where we need to do more work. Under current female offender strategy, there's areas where we need to really develop further in what we're trying to do. I don't work, so I won't pretend to represent the work of the female offender strategy team here, so we'll definitely write back to you with more detail on it. It's clearly an area which we want to keep putting effort into about how we support female offenders. I've talked already about how we're trying to make sure that we have a bespoke offer for them through employment, and we'll continue to work with women's prisons to do that. There's no plans to reduce the strategy at the moment, to review the current strategy at the moment, but we are early days into the Secretary of State's tenure here, and he is a very dynamic Secretary of State, and we haven't seen anything he hasn't looked at yet which he doesn't want to try to improve and make a difference on, and he does have a real drive to make improvements across the system. So whilst I don't think there's any fundamental review we'll be doing of the strategy, I'm sure it's areas where we'll continue to focus about how do we refine and improve it, and no doubt we'll want to speak to as many of you in the sector as possible. I'm sorry about these lights. And then finally on security clearance and people with lived experience. So as I mentioned when I was in my speech earlier, so bringing people with lived experience and prison leavers into employment is genuinely a great opportunity. So I hosted 2 weeks ago a session with the from across government, 3-star generals, all these bigwigs, to talk about employing prison leavers. And we heard from people with lived experience who are working in the civil service and in the public sector. I have to say it was possibly one of the most powerful sessions I've ever been to. And I think we really kind of open minds up, really encourage a culture change about how people think about people with lived experience and prison leavers. It was truly phenomenal to watch. And it's really given me the passion to really kind of push this forward and look at that cultural change across the system. Within MOJ, and HMPPS, we've currently got over 100 people with lived experience on our books we've employed, and I'm really proud about that number, and no doubt we'll continue to increase it. On the specific question about how we actually address some of the security issues, it's an area which Richard Vince, who's the executive director for security, has been working on really closely, and we are trying to kind of make sure we do have really good plans in place for that. So we've been working with the operation leaders to kind of make sure we think about how we can address the clearance processes, and including kind of what waivers we can put in place, because there is elements of discretion as to levels of security clearance required, and we're trying to put more clarity in terms of policy in place to make sure people don't just say computer says no, but to actually review it and understand it. So it's not about putting in big fundamental policy changes, but about changing the processes by which we work. And I think that we will get there. And that we will start to see a difference. I appreciate that will be challenging. So if you have specific areas where you're struggling to get people into prisons, do let us know, and we'll see what we can do to try to unlock that a bit.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid we've run out of time. So what we're going to do with all the other questions that have been sent to us in the chat, folks, we are going to put those all together and get them to Matt and the team. Some of you might get direct answers, and we might also find ways to get the kind of collective wisdom out to the wider audience. Leave that with us to figure out if that's okay. But we will pass those questions on directly to Matt. Matt, we're really grateful to you for your time. We know you're not a wet day in the job, so we're very grateful to you for coming. And we hope this is the start of a productive, dynamic relationship with the brilliant and essential voluntary sector in criminal justice. And organisations just want to be asked. So feel free to ask. There's no such thing as a silly question. Organisations have so much expertise and so much to offer. So please do come see us again and go see them directly. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right, folks, I'm going to hand over to Roma, Chair of Clinks, who is going to chair the annual general meeting, the official business, which is going to take up the next part of today's session. You there, boss?
Thank you, Anne. You can hear me? Yes, good. Thanks ever so much for that. I thought that was really interesting discussion. And I mean, I think, Matt, I don't know whether you're still there, but you did a really good job, because it's a formidable group that we have here, really experienced. So it was a bit of a baptism by fire, I suspect. But I have to say, everything that Matt said will chime with all of us. And I don't suppose I'm speaking out of turn by saying what we now need is action. You know, we hear some great things coming out, and we really now need to support Matt, the MOJ, to make things happen. So I'm hoping this will be the beginning, keeping fingers crossed. So big welcome to you all. There's so many of you here. That is fantastic. I'm absolutely thrilled. I wasn't expecting to have to do Zoom again. Not one will ever forget this last year, but I was hoping to see you all in person. I do find it tricky looking at a screen. I can't see you all. I can't get out and talk to you, have a cup of coffee. It's tricky, but anyway, it's what it is. We have to live with it, as all of you are. So before we go on to the formal AGM business, I just want to give you some brief reflections on the year from April 20 last year to March 21 this year, a very difficult year. So listen, we've seen firsthand the damage and harm inflicted by COVID-19 on people in contact with the criminal justice system and the organisations that support them. This, combined with large-scale changes in the criminal justice policy and operating environment, has resulted in a very difficult year and a half. But I have to say, organisations and individuals have demonstrated strength, adaptability and resilience. And I really do believe that together we're taking steps towards a bright light at the end of a very dark tunnel. We have to be optimistic. We've listened to Matt. We have to hold on to our optimism. I've been doing this for 30 years and you cannot give up. I just know you can't. So at this critical moment, there are opportunities for the voluntary organisations in criminal justice to not only recover, but to learn how services have adapted, build on new ways of working, and ultimately shape a better future for the people we support. We've seen it over and over again in the last 18 months. We have a chance too to address long-standing systemic problems facing the criminal justice system and the people within it. The Black Lives Matter movement has shone increased light on structural and institutional racism. We know this is nothing new for our sector. We know everyone's been working on this for a long time, but at least it's shone a light. So we're really hoping that it'll enable us to move forward. It's so important. But also the probation reforms have provided new challenges and opportunities for voluntary organisations. I'm thrilled about that, having seen what happened before with Chris Grayling. So I think this is a real opportunity. So building on our solid foundations, piece by piece, we can construct a post-pandemic future with what I really hope is a fairer criminal justice system that utilises the vast expertise and diversity of voluntary organisation, treating them as equal partners, one where organisations not only survive but thrive. And if Matt says what he's saying, he wants us to be involved. He recognises how very, very important the voluntary sector is. Without us, they could not manage the number of people they're supporting coming in and out of prison. So this is a chance to form connections and learn from one another. To make sure that as many people as possible can make the most of our annual conference, this year we are spreading the event, including the AGM, over 3 days. So we hope you can join for the whole conference and you have the opportunity to attend flexibly around your other commitments. So you're not having to travel, you can go on mute, you can take your video off, you can pop out, pick up children, make a cup of tea, do whatever you need. So you really can make the most of it. So I really encourage as many of you as possible to sign up to what is actually a wonderful flavour of workshops that we've got. Brilliant. So the conference is packed full of workshops, you'll have seen from the agenda, talks and panel discussions with a chance to hear from key policymakers, voluntary sector leaders, and critically, those of you that are working on the ground. So this 3-day conference is where you can comment on Klinks' work and our priorities for the year ahead. As well as allowing us to carry out our vital business, it is vital to the running of the charity. Our AGM is also the place for members to exercise the right to elect our trustees. And we urge you to take this opportunity to vote. And Alice and I, who is my co-conspirator in all of this, will be encouraging as many of you as possible to put your hand up and vote. We know how much you value being able to come together and spend time with your colleagues from across the system and form new connections, but there haven't been many opportunities to do this over the last 18 months. So do take this chance to connect, learn and work towards building a better future together and make use of the chat function, talk to each other, get each other's emails, make connections. There were some amazing questions, which I'm sure some of others would think, well, that's really interesting. Get in touch with each other. The whole point about really what we're trying to say is a problem shared is a problem halved. We need to work together. I want to give a huge thank you to our Klinks team, Helen and Alice, Joni and Alice amongst many, but all the team at Klinks, for not just choreographing our AGM, but also our conference. This is our second conference in these circumstances, no mean feat, and I'm sure so many of you have had to do the same thing and will appreciate it takes a lot of effort and a huge amount of time. I do owe a huge debt of gratitude to our trustees for all their support during this very difficult time. But a big thank you to our 3 outgoing trustees who have been a huge support over the years. You probably will know that we've just recruited a wonderful group of new trustees and board fellows. Now I could wax lyrical about all of that. I'm not going to. You can read all about them on our website and they are here, as are all our trustees. So I'm hugely grateful. Now, I've been in post for 3 years and it has indeed been an extraordinary time as chair. But the last 18 months has given me the unique opportunity to get to know the Klinks team so much better. And for that, I really am deeply grateful. It has been a very, very special time for me and I have to thank everybody. And finally, a word about our CEO. You will all know that Anne has had an extremely tough year, as I know so many of you have had as well. And we are delighted to have her back. Her resilience, charm, warmth, and unstinting enthusiasm is an example to us all. And I am proud not just to be her chair, but also chair the amazing team of trustees. We do honestly have an unconditional commitment to the work you all do as members. And I can't thank you enough for all your continued support for our work. It has been a hard 18 months. And I am delighted that our membership continues to grow. It's really exciting. But the most important thing is you remain, as always, our priority. You are why we are here. We need to hear from you. So keep in touch, share your thoughts. We can only get better and better with your help. Thank you. Now, it may seem rather odd. I'm going to have to remove what I've got on my screen because I can't see. There we go. I can see you all now. So we're now going to go into the formal business. You have to excuse me. I have to read everything verbatim. Otherwise, I get told off by the Charity Commission. I've got Alice, my teammate, who will interject when I need some help. So the first part of the AGM is apologies. And the only apology I have is Rachel Byrne, who is our wonderful vice chair. who has another, I think it's probably another board meeting of her own. That is the only apology we have. So moving on to Ordinary Resolution 1, that the minutes of the annual general meeting held on the 22nd of October 220 be adopted as a true record of the meeting. Now, please make sure you all have your chat function on. You'll have all seen the AGM minutes. What I need to know, what I need to have is one nominee. Have I seen one nominee? Hopefully. And I need a seconder. Okay. And then I need votes from all of you to accept the 2020 minutes. So I'm hoping Alice is doing that. I can't tell you what the answer is because I can't see. Okay.
We have a nominee, Roma, and I don't think we have a seconder. And we have a seconder now.
We have a nominee, John Collins from the Prisoner Education Trust, and a seconder, Emily Giles from the Bell Foundation.
Lovely. Have we got votes?
Votes are coming in.
Votes coming in.
Great. Okay. Tell me when they're finished, Alice, and I'll move on. Sorry about this, guys. You just have to be patient. A lot of counting. There's a lot of you here. 154.
Thank you, Roma. The resolution has been passed.
Thank you very much. So I'm now going to hand over to Anne to present the annual report.
You are, and well done, Roma. Not easy. The best of times. And we know these aren't the best of times. And just thank you to people who said thank you to us there in that chat. A special shout out to Norma Hoyt from Plias Resettlement, members of Clinks for many years, and a brilliant trustee for many years. And we really miss you, Norma. So it's lovely to see you here with us today. So folks, I'm going to present the annual report. There's going to be some nice slides, and hopefully you've got a copy of it today in your email. It's also available online. Massive thanks to the team for all the activities within it and for its lovely presentation. So we try not to take up too much time, but we do need to make sure that you understand what we have done with your support for those of you who fund us with your money. So we all know that COVID-19 has had a profound and unprecedented impact on everyone working in and affected by the criminal justice system. This, combined with large-scale changes in the criminal justice policy and operating environment, has resulted in a particularly trying and turbulent time. Voluntary organisations have continued to support people in these extraordinary times, and their resilience has been tested to the extreme. They've had to make difficult choices as they reckoned with the destructive impact of the pandemic on their services, dramatically increased need among people they support, and significant financial pressure. We've seen countless examples of your resilience and flexibility as you've grappled with these challenges. Klinks, working alongside the sector, has continued to support, promote, and represent voluntary organisations through these challenging times. So this report sets out the activities that we've undertaken to do that. We too have needed to rapidly adapt to new ways of working, as many in the sector have done, and last year saw us respond creatively and work flexibly to continue to deliver our ambitious aims in our strategy, creating change together. Our annual report for 2020 to 2021 details our achievements and progress towards our goals in the second year of our 3-year strategy and sets out plans for the future. So some of the key activities will follow. We delivered a comprehensive communications programme responding strategically to people's needs during the pandemic. In March and April 2020, we totally revisited our communications plans, thank you team, and set out how we would use our channels flexibly and effectively when presented with the unprecedented situation of the pandemic. Throughout the year, we've developed strong partnerships with communications colleagues in HMPPS to ensure we had up-to-date information for our audiences regarding COVID-19 and its impact. We tried to clearly communicate the role and value of the voluntary sector, both in meeting the needs of people in prison and throughout the probation programme development and commissioning processes. Our communications programme included over 40 publications, 91 e-bulletins to over 20,000 subscribers, social media to over 25,000 followers, dedicated COVID-19 web pages giving up-to-date information, and a huge range of content on our blog, which also supported the hashtag Nevermore Needed campaign, calling for financial support for charities in the pandemic. We've collaborated with partners to advocate on behalf of the sector, outlining the important work organisations have undertaken during the pandemic and their important role as restrictions eased and we move towards recovery. We built on our events and training offer. The pandemic made physical events impossible at the beginning of the financial year. We embraced online platforms to ensure we could provide an enhanced events offer which supported people to connect and develop at a crucial time. This led to a significant increase in both the number of events and the participation from voluntary sector across England and Wales. We welcomed over 5,000 attendees across 114 events during the year. The area development team provided support and opportunities for organisations to come together regularly through region-specific criminal justice forums. We extended our reach by running All England and All Wales forums. We saw higher involvement from organisations that are based in areas where we don't currently have a dedicated area development officer. These events provided information sharing, discussion and feedback, focusing in particular on the pandemic and the impact on operating delivering services and the recovery landscape. The area development team has continued to provide representation at regional strategic boards and meetings in the North East and North West of England, London and Wales. We provided one-to-one support and information to members around a range of subjects and issues, including funding challenges, partnership working, and in particular, the complexities faced by the sector during COVID-19 and the probation reform agenda and commissioning process. We set up dedicated COVID-19 at Klinks.org and probation at Klinks.org, still live, email mailboxes for organisations to send us information and queries, which we could use to inform and influence at both the national and local level. We delivered consultancy support to organisations led by and focused on the needs of racially minorised people with funding from HMPPS. 50 organisations were supported through this consultancy support. We represented organisations during the reforms to probation, highlighting challenges and barriers for them, which successfully led to the voluntary sector emerging as the main partner. We built strong and constructive relationships with the probation reform team and facilitated their engagement with voluntary sector organisations to support their understanding of organisations' experiences of the commissioning process and the team's ability to draw upon the voluntary sector's knowledge and expertise. To understand the impact of the pandemic on organisations, we ran 6 surveys with an average of 118 organisations responding to each, with the research culminating in our report, The Impact of COVID-19 on the Voluntary Sector and Criminal Justice. Our findings were shared with the Justice Select Committee, Ministry of Justice, and we launched at an event attended by senior officials from HMPPS and the MOJ. Clinks chairs the Reducing Reoffending Third Sector Advisory Group, the RR3, which provides the key interface between the voluntary sector and the Ministry of Justice in order to increase mutual understanding and build a strong and effective partnership. We set up 2 special interest groups in this year. The special interest group on COVID-19 met over 30 times. It communicated to senior officials the challenges voluntary organisations and their beneficiaries faced in the pandemic and built a strong relationship with the operational Gold Command of prisons and probation. The special interest group on probation reform fed in the experiences of the sector into the design of the new reformed probation model. It met with officials to provide advice on the model, including the design of the dynamic framework. We continue to be members of the Ministry of Justice's Advisory Board for Female Offenders, advising on the implementation of the Female Offender Strategy, and we raised concerns about the planned addition of 500 places in prison for women. As part of our continuing efforts to realise our ambition to become an anti-racist organisation, we reviewed the language we use when talking about race and racism to ensure that it challenges and doesn't reinforce racist policies, ideas and structures. We worked closely with leaders across the voluntary sector from organisations led by and focused on racially minorised people, our trustees and staff team to inform this work. We highlighted that the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill will further entrench race inequality in the criminal justice system. Alongside our partners, we coordinated an open letter, parliamentary briefing, petition and social media campaign calling on the government to withdraw the elements of the bill it concedes will increase racial inequality. In the early stages of the pandemic, it became clear that its impact would mean some organisations would face a financial cliff edge over the summer. To provide organisations access to funding, we set up the COVID-19 Small Grants Programme and gave out £463,500 in 90 grants on behalf of the Ministry of Justice, HMPPS, with some additional funding from the Paul Hamlin Foundation. COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on racially minoritized communities. In addition to the consultancy support programme, we recruited a race and justice coordinator, Janice, and established a race and justice network. The network is already proving valuable to these organisations, and we're delighted to have been able to develop this work. Clinks continue to run service user involvement managers network events, and our women's network is 55 members strong. We developed emerging leaders through a coaching and mentoring scheme and provided expert seminars and training courses on fundraising and impact involving service users in co-production, lived experience, leadership and feminist leadership. Families organisations have had a particularly difficult year as a result of the pandemic. We secured funding to support these organisations and took part in fortnightly calls with HMPPS so they could maintain regular contact with family organisations currently holding family service contracts with prisons. With Homeless Link in mind, Klinks is a founding member of the Making Every Adult Matter Coalition. Our main partnership managers in the Southwest and Northeast have continued to support and develop local areas, working in Bristol, Plymouth, Cornwall, Exeter, Sunderland, Redcar and Cleveland. The focus of the National Criminal Justice Arts Alliance pivoted to promoting ongoing arts activities under restricted prison regimes and promoting practical information to our network and to HMPPS staff. 17 arts practitioners were supported in criminal justice settings through the Professional Development Bursary Scheme. Our Health and Justice Network gathered intelligence from our members. Key concerns were fed back to NHS England Health and Justice team, and updates on vaccinations and other essential updates were given to members. We published 3 articles from our online evidence base written by leading academics, which aims to support the sector to base its services on the available evidence and encourage commissioners to award contracts to organisations delivering an evidence-based approach. And I'd just like to thank the academics that have taken part and Russell Webster. We adjusted our working practice to enable us to continue to deliver high-quality services alongside supporting the well-being of our amazing staff. This included moving all staff to work from home. During this time, we recruited and inducted 14 new people to Klinks stars. All voluntary organisations were offered free membership for the year. Smaller organisations won't pay membership fees until April 2020, thanks partly to funding from the Garfield Weston Foundation. We embedded our new organisational structure. CEO and director roles work alongside our board on specific strategic areas and objectives, and staff teams now form clear directorates supported by the directors. In 2020, following the murder of George Floyd, a spotlight was rightly shone on racism and discrimination across the world. We announced our aspiration to make Klinks a truly anti-racist organisation in all we say and do, and how we operate internally and externally. We have a way to go. We have a working group to take this activity forward and are working on activities across all of our strategic objectives towards this aspiration. So to the future, in the 2021 to 22 year, we will inform and influence the sector and stakeholders through a continued comprehensive communications programme, developing our strategic communications offer. We'll strengthen our area-based support. We'll maintain our footprint in the areas we currently have dedicated resource, and where possible, cover new geographical areas subject to need and funding. We'll review our membership events and training, ensuring that our offer best meets the needs of you, our members. We'll aim to grow our membership. We'll focus on COVID-19 recovery and probation reform, supporting and engaging with voluntary organisations to identify and understand their needs and support them to overcome the ongoing challenges they face. We'll research the voluntary sector's experience of the Probation Reform programme and influence its continued development. We'll continue to focus our advocacy work on the needs and experiences of organisations providing specialist services, including those working with racially minoritized people and with women. We will collaboratively develop our policy messages and deliver a new policy influencing training programme. We'll develop and prioritise resource for our networks of organisations, support the commissioning of good quality family services, and support the Southwest and Northeast to develop the MEME approach. We will ensure funders and commissioners are informed of sector developments and seek to widen the range of funders interested in the criminal justice system. We will support our anti-racist Clinks working party to identify needs for activity in key areas. We will seek out multi-year core funding and diversify our income streams. We will retain a valued core team with the skills and expertise to meet the needs of our sector. And we will set up a member advisory group. This is a live plea. We are open to applications, and if somebody could make sure that that information goes to all members, and just do a little reminder in light lunch and online. We are actively looking for members to join that advisory group. Now we're very excited to have that new development. Just wanted to thank all of you who've been part of this last year. Members of the COVID-19 SIG and the probation SIG, everybody who's been in touch, everybody who's told us what they're doing. And a special thanks to the Klinks staff and trustees, our members, supporters and funders. Here's to the next year, and over to you, Roma.
Thanks, Anne. I believe now that I'm handing over to Simon. I haven't seen Simon, to present the financial accounts for 2021. Thank you. Simon, are you there?
I'm here, Roma, yes. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
good.
you very
Hello.
much.
Great to see you. Okay, right, I'm formally handing over to you now.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and to present the Klinks audited accounts for the 2020-21 financial year. As I'm sure has been the case for many of you, Klinks looks back on the last financial year and remembers it mainly as a challenging period due to the impact of the COVID pandemic. That said, in terms of the finances, I'm very pleased to report income of just under £2.2 million for the financial year, an expenditure of £2.275 million, which means a deficit of £77,000. And that was a planned deficit. The trustees had previously agreed to invest £100,000 into the women's network, and that spending was split. £50,000 was spent in 2019-20, and another £50,000 in 2020-21, this current financial year. The remainder of the deficit is due to an additional designated investment into the Klinks website of £20,000. Klinks was not only able to deliver on planned budgeted activity during this period, but in addition, we executed a summer and winter small grants program working with and predominantly funded by the MOJ, and also a race and justice probation grants program, and mentioned those just now. Also, thanks to the support of the Garfield Weston Foundation, Klinks was able to waive all membership fees for 2020-2021. Again, that's something that Anne just mentioned, and she also mentioned that, as we know, our members found this benefit to be extremely helpful, and Klinks considered it of such importance that it's been extended to the 2021-2022 year. Further commitments from our funders enable Klinks to deliver much needed additional support to the sector by recruiting extra resource, both internally and through the engagement of sector experts for specialist advice. Looking forward, Klinks began the 2021-22 year with a planned full year financial deficit of £75,000. However, the most recent forward-looking projections are that Klinks will now break even, which is a result of meticulous financial planning and capitalising on any natural savings that have occurred. We'll continue to remain vigilant and aware of our current environment, constantly monitoring the situation and ensuring that we secure the required financial support for Klinks, its members and the sector. We acknowledge that some of our resilience is because of the statutory funding that we receive, and for that we are very grateful, as we are for the continued support of all of our other key funders. The annual report also sets out our current reserves policy. The reserves are set at a level that allows Klinks to continue to operate should we suffer a critical loss of funding, sufficient to allow us to find alternative sources of funds and to transition to an organisation that could continue to serve the sector at whatever level would then be appropriate and achievable. Having reviewed this policy as a board, the current approach hasn't changed. The board will, of course, continue to assess the risks and the quantum of reserves required. The current calculation of the appropriate level of reserves is £470,000. As at the 31st of March 2021, Klinks held £454,000 in reserves. And although that's slightly below our ideal level of calculated reserves, as I mentioned just now, we're confidently anticipating a break-even budget for the current year. So this level is unlikely to change for the year ended 31st of March 2022. On balance, trustees are comfortable with the current reserves. We're mindful of the fact that we should endeavour to increase the amount to match the level required, but also that during the current environment, that shouldn't be our primary objective. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite any questions.
Do we have any questions from anybody? Speak now or forever. And I'm sure the team won't object to having any questions on email. So by all means, use that as a way if there are things you want to ask. We are completely open and transparent. So we're more than happy to take questions if it feels more appropriate to do it a separate time.
Members will all have received the annual report today by email. So if you feel more comfortable replying then when you've had a chance, reply. You'll either have had the email from myself or Alice Proper. You can send them all directly to me. Look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Simon and Victoria and all her team. These things just don't happen easily. They have worked so hard with the figures, and it's a great credit to all of them that we have achieved what we've achieved. And I certainly, and I know everybody else on the trustee board, is what helps me sleep at night. So I'm eternally grateful for that. Thank you. Right, we're going to move on now to Ordinary Resolution 2, which is that the audited report and financial statements for the year ended 31st of March 2021 for Klinks be received and adopted. And we're applying the same technique as before. I need a nominee, a seconder, and then I need people to vote. So can I please have a nominee?
You have a nominee from Jackie Carpenter.
Great. And then I need a seconder.
I think Pauline Crowe has just raised her hand.
Actually, jolly good, Pauline. Thank you. Thanks, Pauline. And now I need everyone to vote, please. Thank you. Great. Well done, everyone. You got the hang of it.
Thank you, Roma. The resolution's passed.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone. Brilliant. Now, moving on to ordinary resolution number 3, that the following trustees be re-elected as trustees of Klinks in accordance with Article 37 of the Articles of Association. And the first one is me, which I find deeply strange. I should be out of the room or put myself on, no video. So if you decide you want me out, you all feel free to say so. Okay. So those we're going to give a brief explanation for the next 2 trustees that we're going to be bringing on. For those who don't know, I'll very quickly say I began as a volunteer at Feltham Young Offenders, started off as setting up with a friend the first radio station in the prison, went on to work for Feltham as their voluntary sector coordinator, ran a tiny charity in there for a while, then moved on, became a chair of Trailblazers, the Griffin Society, and, just to name a few. And ultimately, in the end, I ended up by running a campaign called Make Justice Work. But before that, I set up the Prison Radio Association, which is, I'm so proud of them. It's brilliant. They're great. And this is amazing, being the chair of Klinks. So I'm not going to say anything more, but I am going to ask for a nominee, please. And then a seconder. Right, can I have a nominee? Thanks, Pauline.
Pauline.
Oh.
Thanks, Pauline.
Thanks, Pauline. And a seconder, please.
John Collins.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.
Just for the notes, Alice, Pauline Crowe is from the wonderful Prisoners Abroad.
Yeah. And thank you, John. And now everyone can vote.
Thank you, Roma. Resolution is passed.
Thank you very much, everyone. Right, moving on to resolution 4, that the following individuals are elected as trustees of Klinks. So first of all, it's Richard Booty, who I believe is with us. With a priority in our strategy to deliver better support for organisations supporting families and those working in prisons, we wish to elect Richard Booty, a trustee with significant experience in managing prisons and working within the prison service for responsibility for commissioning effective support for family ties. Really important for the heart and soul of Klinks. So can I ask for a nominee, please? Nominee. Thank you. Thanks, Maura. Great. Thank you, Jackie. And then a seconder, please. Amina, thank you very much. And if I could have votes, please, now.
Lovely, thanks very much. That's passed as well.
Lovely. And Simon Rudding is the next trustee we would like to elect. In continuing to encourage creativity and inspiration within the criminal justice system, we wish to elect Simon Rudding, a trustee with immense experience within the arts. Currently as the co-chair of the National Criminal Justice Arts Alliance, embedded with Klinks, Simon continues to champion the use of arts in supporting rehabilitation and resettlement in prisons and in the community. So could I please ask for a nominee? Thank you, Anna. Okay, thank you. And a seconder? Lovely, thanks, Vicky. And then if everyone could vote, please.
Lovely, that's passed as well. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Thanks, everybody. Well, that concludes the work of the AGM. Thank you so much. You've made it so much easier for me. We got through this really smoothly. And I'm now delighted to hand back to Anne, who will explain about the next session.
Well, I'm hoping you're all going to really enjoy this session. You're going to get a comfort break, to have a cup of tea and a wee, and whatever you're going to do, your 10 minutes. You might stretch your legs. So the next part of the session is a panel discussion, but we're just going to have a quick comfort break. Now, in case you're worried about leaving the meeting, coming back, if you want, you can just turn off your camera and mute your microphone and just stay in the session and come back then in 10 minutes. We're going to start bang on 3:10. But if you want to leave completely, you should be able to rejoin with the links you were sent. If you've got any issues rejoining, email events@clinks.org. But I'm going to let you go now. Have a tea, a coffee. Anyone thinks it's 5 o'clock, go get stronger. And come back for a brilliant panel this afternoon, Josh, Gemma, Hamish and myself. So we'll see you in a few minutes. My fellow Celts included. Okay, so folks, just to say that we are recording again for the benefits of the notes and dissemination post-event for friends and the secretary who can't be with us. So if you don't want to be recorded, can you just turn your video off? Also, just to say we are tweeting today and we really encourage you to take part and to spread the message. The hashtag is capital B, building, capital A, capital B, better, capital F, future, building a better future. And please do capitalize your words so they can be picked up by trackers for people with sight and hearing needs. Okay then, so we have come to the panel event. I always love these events and it's a shame that we're not together, but we can reach more people this way and that is definitely good. So again, we're going to have questions. Your questions might come up while people are speaking. If you pop them in the chat box with capital letters, big word question, we will be capturing those. Chris, our Director of Support and Development, who we poached from the membership last year, brilliant stroke from us from unlock. Sorry, I'm not really sorry. He's going to be getting those questions to me, so pop those in the chat. We have a brilliant panel today, and without further ado, I'm going to go to the first of those panelists, Josh, the founder of Be the Change CIC, a social enterprise providing life-changing support, education, and transitional opportunities for people in the criminal justice system or at risk of entering it. Josh and his team are focused entirely on adding measurable value to individuals' lives through dynamic and inspirational mentoring support, and equally developing new initiatives to support attitude and behavioural change. The most important principle for Be the Change is service user and expert engagement. All the Be the Change programmes are designed and in many cases delivered by leaders with lived experience. Josh, it is brilliant to have you here. You are famous in the Clinks all-staff chat. Amanda in the Southwest is always bigging you up. And it's brilliant that you were able to give some time today because we know how busy you are. So I'm going to ask you some questions. It's not mastermind. Well, it is. It's stuff you really know. So first, we were really interested to know, are you able to reflect on the vision of the keynote speaker, Matt Gray, and how you feel that this might impact your organisation?
Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here. Yeah, so I kind of felt, you know, some really good stuff there. I mean, the three pillars of housing, employment, and substance misuse, to really focus on those three. Yes, there's so many more we can focus on, but actually, if we can focus on those three areas and really put maximum resource into those areas and try and get those to an acceptable standard, then I think I like that direction of travel. For us as an organisation, yeah, I mean, I don't want to shoot. I don't want to kind of get too far ahead because I think I'm going to have to answer this question a bit later on. But in terms of, for me, it's about understanding a bit more where the end game is. Where is the end goal in all of this? And you know, it just seems to be kind of, let's throw more money at things, let's have more initiatives. Whereas actually, like I said, I'd really want to kind of understand where the end game is.
There's something about end game, there's something about sharing that vision and framework, isn't there? So we'll definitely feed that back. So the last few years obviously have been a challenge, but you guys have really, you know, knocked it out of the park. What learning have you taken from operating differently in the last couple of years?
I think the learning is actually the biggest thing for us is being flexible, not being bound by internal policies and procedures that hold us back, that kind of stop us from being able to react very quickly to the need. And as an organisation, we pride ourselves on that. You know, it's decisions that we make are very quick. We don't have, you know, tons and tons of board meetings to make, you know, day-to-day decisions, whatever it might be. We have a really kind of thin reporting structure, so we can make decisions really quickly to like I said, to really benefit the need of the people that we're supporting. Any decision, particularly the people on the ground, the people that are delivering all the stuff within the prisons or in the community, you know, decisions will be given to them, you know, pretty much immediately, so they can respond. And I think that's something from the pandemic quite clearly, that has stood us in good stead to be able to do that. And that's really one of the positive things that we will not change, because that's what it's about. It's about the people that we're supporting, always about the people we're supporting. It's not about me or organisation, it's purely about those individuals. And if the answer is no, we can't do it, then we need to find out ways in which we can do it.
Very much form, follow and function, and the agility, so that you can be as responsive. I think there's a lot of organisations that would concur that that's what was helpful, and those that would probably say that's what held them back. A lot of process, a lot of difficulties that meant decisions and prioritisation was really difficult. In terms of longer term, you talked about end game for HMPPS, but for Be the Change, long-term concerns or hopes that you have. What do you think maybe those might be? And could you share for us the priority for you, for the criminal justice system, in recovering from and rebuilding from the COVID crisis?
Yeah, I think my concerns, and we're starting to see it a little bit now, in terms of there was so much positivity in terms of our industry and how it reacted to COVID, and particularly with some of the funders and the grant making organisations, you know, really responsive, turning around grants and funding very quickly. And we're just, I would shoot myself in the foot, but we're just starting to see now some of the old stuff coming back in, some really big delays, and it's kind of, yes, we understand that there needs to be checks and balances and due diligence taken, but my question is, you know, during COVID, we could turn around a lot of these programs and funding initiatives very, very quickly. Let's not go back to the old ways, because actually the funds are vital for the people that we're all supporting. You know, they're not going to us, they're going, you know, the lion's share is going to the people that we support. So it's kind of, you know, I throw that back in it, and I put a challenge back out to all of those funders out there, and I include the MOJ in this, particularly through the dynamic framework and whatnot, is actually, you know, looking at the processes and procedures and ensuring that the organisations within the criminal justice system are supported, you know, extremely quickly, and delaying payments and stuff is not helpful. In terms
I hear that loud and clear. In terms of recovery, so is that very much a priority for you, is around agile funding, you know, as little, as I have to say to them, as little red tape as you can bear, and if you think, oh, we still have risk, review your risk appetite.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's about, you know, particularly us as an organisation, as we're, you know, none of us have experienced the last 18 months before, and it's, you know, and equally none of us are experts. You know, we aren't COVID experts, so it's kind of making sure that we as an organisation are as agile, like I said, are as agile as possible, so we can react and respond. Particularly, you know, maybe we've been doing some programs in the past. Maybe some of those, you know, keep putting those checks and balances in place to make sure they are fit for purpose, make sure they are doing what we want them to do. And if those programs aren't working, then we'll scrap them, and we'll actually make sure that we keep delivering stuff that is of beneficial to the people that we're supporting. But and the way in which we kind of ascertain that is by keep having that dialogue with the people that we're supporting to ensure that we are, as an organisation, fit for purpose.
It's very much something I know that we've always understood from your organisation, but I think we've seen it more and more as a real superpower, a real strength in organisations, that if you are going to make it through the crisis, the more connected you are to your beneficiaries, the more you know that you're on the right page, you're doing the right thing. So actually it's not an extra, it's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. It's, you know, your purpose is to make things better for the people you serve.
Totally, and I think it's, you know, and I maintain, you know, the people that we support, the people that are going in and out of the criminal justice system, these people, they have the answers. They have the answers to what needs to be done. So, you know, it's just, you know, sometimes it's quite difficult for us as organisations to kind of capture some of that, and it's difficult sometimes to deliver some of that. But equally, they are the most important people, and they are the people that have all the answers. And if we keep listening to those people, they will give us the answers. So we don't have to come up and create weird and wonderful programs, because they'll tell us what needs to be done, and that's through their own personal circumstances.
That's probably the best ending to any contribution. Thank you so much, Josh. We'll come back to you in the question section. Thanks a million. We're now going where I used to go on my holidays as a child. We're going to Will. Hello, Gemma. Good afternoon. How are you? Gemma has been the driving force behind the development of the North Wales Women's Centre. Starting in 2001 with an IT training project for 140 women, Gemma went on to secure funding to develop a one-stop shop for women in West Rural, the most deprived ward in Wales. The organisation has evolved to provide a community centre, support, training and interventions for women from all backgrounds and situations, including those who are at risk of or have already been involved in the criminal justice system. She has overseen the development of this flagship centre, bringing more than £5 million of resources to North Wales communities and delivering services to more than 4,000 women. Fair play. Gemma, what did you think? What are your reflections on the vision that Matt Gray set out, and how will this impact on the North Wales Women's Centre?
Well, firstly, just to remind anyone who doesn't know us that we're small, we're very small, based in the community. So we don't work in prisons. So that's the first point to make, really. So I can only speak from our perspective. And of course, Matt gave a very positive talk, and I don't think there's anyone who would argue with the ambitions that were outlined. Whilst, of course, I understand the focus on probation reforms, and I understand that Matt isn't an expert on the female offender strategy, I feel that the commitment to deliver the framework is often pushed into the long grass as other areas are prioritised. So I suppose I'm going to be very specific in my reflection. I would like to hear more about the commitments outlined in the female offender strategy. The framework identified support for locally led, partnership-focused, evidence-based implementation. And women's centres represent that locally led holistic service. And like other services, have had to navigate the dynamic purchasing framework, whilst firefighting in a pandemic with increased demand on services and less resources. So the women's centres certainly have done an incredible job of surviving and excelling in bidding and winning the women's resources contracts to deliver the new resettlement and rehabilitation services. We, however, did not go down that road for a multitude of reasons. I won't go through all of them now. Some of them were ethical, but mostly a lack of understanding of the vision in Wales, I would say, was behind it. I partly blame the pandemic for that, really because there was a fragmentation of communication and a lack of knowledge on what was ahead from the usual communication routes. And it was just unfortunate that we felt isolated from these conversations at that time when we really needed to hear it. Anyway, going back to the vision, I still say that in Wales, we have the female offending blueprint, which is fantastic. And we're very proud of this work taking place in Wales. The resettlement and rehabilitation work providers in our area are PSS, and they are co-located with us, which we hope will generate added value. The eventual achievement, I hope, will be a seamless service to women. And they are exciting times, but I keep coming back to this. I am really concerned that lip service will be paid to women's services, specifically to the added value. And when I say added value, I mean non-funded resources that are delivered by all of us. And last but not least, it's concerning that after Corston, we are increasing prison places for women when all the research and recommendations say that prison is not where the majority should be. We need investment in community resources to enable true early intervention and prevention. So I want to believe all of this will work, but I would be hopeful that there's enough funding for both probation services and the new providers to deliver on the ambitions. Because, you know, being old and long in the tooth and a bit cynical, I've seen both probation services and third sector struggle under really under-resourced, you know, situations. So yeah, positive, but, you know, a little bit cynical as well. So let's watch this space, I suppose.
Nothing wrong with healthy cynicism following from 20 years of experience as she experientially drops her earbud in her coffee. Gemma, I'm sure like the question, what learning have you taken for the last 2 years? Yeah. But, you know, is there anything in the last couple of years, you know, since the pandemic, given you're going such a long time, that you've taken to doing differently that maybe you'll hold on to?
I'd say probably the biggest lesson we've learned is that change can be good. It wasn't all bad. And you don't need to operate in a certain way just because you've done it that way for the last 20 years. It's a shame that it took a pandemic to make us realise this, but it did. And whilst, you know, the closure of our community centre was, and still is, devastating on women and the services, we have found different ways. Obviously, harnessing technology has been useful. And also the fact that we are small, it means that the staff could take on multiple roles and we could all share the burden a little bit and mobilise very fast. So, you know, there were definitely benefits, I suppose, to being a small organisation that we saw, you know, enabled us to move quickly and address the immediate issues that were needed to be addressed, you know, basically women in crisis. I would say also that the pandemic has shown all of us the value and power of community-led services. I mean, there are countries in the EU who just don't have volunteers. They can't believe what we're doing here. So, you know, we really do need to value volunteers and the voluntary sector as a massive resource. And I'm sure it's partly why we are doing so well in our sector, because we have this, you know, amazing resource. And just a little final note about technology. In terms of rurality, yes, it was helpful. And we certainly realised that some of the most chaotic of women that we support actually did better using messaging services than, you know, making them attend face-to-face meetings. So again, all of these things removing our normal practice actually helped us to see the other side. You know, sometimes we're not as responsive as we should be to the needs of the women that we were supporting. And I'd like to think we would take that forward and be flexible and work with what the women need to help them engage better.
Yeah, there's loads of learning in some of that use of technology that we really need to pick up, isn't it? But I think time is on us right now. So finally, any long-term concerns or hopes that you have, and what do you think the priority should be for the system as it recovers and rebuilds?
Ooh, that is such a big question, and again, I could go on too long, and I'll try not to. I suppose coming back to what I said in the beginning, a big concern for me is communication. Reflecting on what's happened, I think that there is a danger, certainly, of the powers that be to prescribe what should be done instead of a bottom-up approach of listening. Because I can honestly say I feel done to and not done with over the last couple of years. And I think there's learning that may have been missed because of that. And, you know, Wales is its own, you know, specific area with its own issues and its own positives and negatives. But certainly for us in the north of Wales, we felt quite isolated over the last couple of years. So going forward, I would hope that communication is better, and from all I can hear, there's new groups forming, and I'm excited about them. And I think, you know, it sounds like there are plans afoot to kind of address that. So yes, I think, you know, I'm hopeful that things will improve, and we have learned those mistakes of the last couple of years. Yeah.
And hopefully you could feel the width and not done to. We'll get you back in another panel in a few years to come. Thank you, Gemma, as ever. We'll come back to you for questions. Last but by no means least, I'm coming to Hamish. So Hamish has transferred 15 plus years private sector experience in entrepreneurial and startup businesses to the voluntary sector. He works at the Wise Group, where his role is to expand the scale and impact of its programmes, all of which focus on person-centred mentoring and support. The Wise Group is a social enterprise operating across the UK, supporting over 30,000 plus families a year. He's also a director of St. Giles Wise, a new values-led voluntary sector partnership between the St. Giles and the Wise Group, delivering high-calibre services for people in the criminal justice system, empowering them to overcome barriers and take positive steps forward in their lives. Currently delivering 16 contracts on behalf of the MOJ for personal wellbeing and women's services. So Hamish, you're very welcome. It's the first time that the St. Giles Wise partnership across the sector has had an opportunity to talk to everybody. So what did you think of the keynote speaker, and what do you think in terms of St. Giles Wise work now, what the impact of some of what Matt said might be?
Thanks, and firstly, thanks very much for inviting me, as you say, on the first time for St. Giles Wise outing on a panel like this. So thank you very much for letting me sit on the panel. And you said at the start that you intended the event to be inspiring, that would help me recharge. So I certainly feel inspired and rejuvenated so far, particularly at Gemma and Josh's comments, which I don't think I can argue with anything Josh and Gemma have said. So you can relax. That starts it off easily. I think in terms of Matt's presentation and his vision, I was quite inspired and enthused, I suppose, by what he was talking about. You know, you wouldn't really have thought he'd been in the job for only a couple of weeks. He does seem to have quite a considered vision for it. I was particularly interested in the work that you talked about in the accelerator prisons. Obviously, I know about the New Futures Network. interesting the quantity of money which they are proposing on kind of throwing towards the various problems that we've got. I mean, I counted 200 million for accommodation and 80 million for drug treatment. You know, it is quite a lot of money. But I guess, as everybody has mentioned already, there are quite a few missing gaps around what is needed. For example, like relationships hasn't been covered broadly at all. I mean, this kind of triangle of homes, health and jobs, on paper, it makes perfect sense. In reality, as we deliver services, and pretty much everybody on this call delivers services to people on the coalface, how it happens in reality is far, far different to what it might look like on a piece of paper. Now, in advance of this, I looked at some of the areas of need which we see for people coming out of prison, and those on probation, but those coming out of prison in particular. And you know, the biggest need of all the people we work with, and it's over 90%, is on financial support. That's the single biggest thing which people need support with on release from custody. And that's, we do a number of mentoring services across the UK. And the fundamental part of this, which has been quite tricky during the pandemic, but is a meet at the gate service. And that's because you meet an individual at the gate on the day of liberation and you take them to do the things which are critical for that moment of release. And pretty much the first visit is to sort out someone's benefits, because it still can't be seamlessly done pre-release, and it requires work to be done. And you know, when Matt was talking about homes, health, jobs, you know, I think that number one, financial inclusion, financial support is missing from that, because it's just the number one thing which almost every beneficiary is kind of what I'm use your word on. Almost any beneficiary that we work with needs an element, a big element of financial support on release. And that wasn't even one of the day one services to be procured, which again, we thought was particularly unusual decision to make. So I don't disagree. I don't think anyone can disagree with the importance of a job, but from the experiences many of us have had, if you put somebody into a job when the hygiene factors of life are not sufficiently satisfied, then individuals don't sustain that employment, which then results in bad experiences for employers who turn around and say, oh, we tried that before. And this is the only, you only get this in our sector actually, which is if an employer has a bad experience employing someone with convictions, then they basically tar everyone with convictions with the same brush and say, oh, I tried employing an offender before, it didn't work out. It's literally the only sector where that happens. You never employ a woman and then it doesn't work out and you say, oh, I'm never employing a woman again. It is literally just someone's an offender. If it doesn't work out, then you say, I'm never trying that again. Hopefully that roughly answers your question.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing very much is the importance of getting it right, because it's so difficult for people anyway. They face so many challenges that all of that stuff has to be in place. Now, you get loads of response in the chat. I'm just going to say to people, we'll come to questions in a few minutes. So if anybody wants to turn that comment into a question, capital letters question, and Chris is going to start collating those. But Hamish, you've talked actually about that vision that you need to see, and very much the experience of the last couple of years, and particularly, you know, one would expect you to almost be using this as a counselling or confession session, given that you're so knee-deep in dynamic framework. But what learning have you taken from operating differently in the last couple of years? I'm actually quite interested in working in collaboration with another big organisation.
Yeah, that's I'll maybe come on to that in some of the chats. Suffice to say that the partnership that we put together with St Giles is possibly something that I'll come on to, but it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, because it took so long to put together. We were working on this for about 18 months before the dynamic framework even came out. So there may be some questions on that, but it kind of does point out, and I have some notes about this for later on. Number one, the importance of collaboration, but also the amount of time which is necessary to do appropriate collaboration. If anybody is by any chance here from the MOJ's procurement team, and I just point out that you cannot possibly expect anyone in our sector or anywhere to respond to a tender in 8 working days. So I said that earlier in the week. So just in case anyone happens to be here, I'll just say that again. You asked Anne about kind of how can we do things differently? And actually it's a comment Gemma made, which I was amused about actually, because it was exactly the same comment, which is it took a pandemic for people to, for us in particular, to realize different ways of operating. So we do, mentoring services is our bread and butter. And what we mean by mentoring is a whole range of things. Mentoring isn't befriending to us. Mentoring is the whole spectrum from crisis intervention at the sharp end to befriending and just being an ear to listen to, or someone to listen to at the softer end, and everything in between. Now, we've done that nearly entirely face-to-face for 40 years. And the pandemic kind of made that impossible. And what we discovered is that delivering some of those services remotely and effectively doing mentoring over the telephone, we actually have resulted in arguably better outcomes than we do in other times. And the reason for I asked one of my colleagues before this, I said, why weren't we doing this beforehand? And they said, well, we didn't really think about it. We didn't need to. But the big thing was, as we all know from the importance of mentoring, and particularly a lot of our staff have got lived experience. And I had a session the other week with some of our mentors, lived experience mentors, and I asked them about what was most important, what was the biggest step change in their journey. And it's not lived experience only from custody. We have lived experience across the whole remit of experiences. And the biggest change they all said was it's when they were forced in some cases to take control of their own direction. And actually what the pandemic has resulted in is because our mentors haven't been on hand to handhold people as much, it has artificially forced our beneficiaries to take control of their own direction a little bit quicker in some cases. And that was the kind of funny thing when Gemma said, until you have to change, you don't. And actually we could have done this years ago, but in fact, probably we didn't think it was a problem. And now we've hopefully empowered more people because we've just artificially, we've not been able to support people as much on a hand-holding basis.
I think perhaps maybe the element of choice, certainly the learning that User Voice picked up about people's experience of probation supervision was, enabling people not only to have to maybe take charge, but also trusting people to do things themselves, rather than like monitoring and always watching people in a certain way, and allowing for that flexibility and allowing an experience of how people are going through stuff. So Hamish, we want to come to people's questions, but I want to ask you the same as everybody else. So long-term concerns or hopes that you have, and what do you think the priority should be for the system as it recovers and rebuilds?
Sorry, could you just repeat that? And my neighbour thinks of a dog which is barking in the background.
Oh, the old dogs, shocking things. Long-term concerns or hopes that you might have, and what should be the priority now for the criminal justice system as it recovers and rebuilds from COVID?
I'm an eternal optimist, so I guess all of my hopes are wildly aspirational, and most of my concerns are fairly rainbow tinted. So yeah, take everything I say with a pinch of reality, I guess. I think I'm quite hopeful about the future because I reread through, the Ministry of Justice, had its, it redid its strategy in November 2019, which I reread through, that kind of national strategy, and it all is very positive. There's a huge amount of talk in there about collaboration. And I think collaboration is probably the thing which forums like this ultimately create. From Matt's conversation or Matt's presentation, he was implying that they would like to be more collaborative in some of their work. When there are pros and cons of the dynamic framework, but I think one thing which they did fairly good job of was they did communicate fairly well and collaborate with people in terms of what was coming. They didn't get all of it right, and they know that, but they did. There is a decent bit of collaboration. Now, collaboration is fairly critical to what we do as organizations because no one organization can support an individual coming out of prison or on probation. It really takes a village of organizations to support people, but we have to do it at kind of at least multiple levels. I think there is collaboration which is done very, very well on the ground. You know, the mentors that we work with will certainly work with staff at the front line in organizations on this call. I think as a sector at that kind of bottom level or closest to the coal face, I don't think there is any organizations or sectors which are better at that kind of on the ground tactical collaboration. As we go kind of slightly further up the tree, it's hard to collaborate on a financial level often because the budgets are not sufficiently big. I mean, Matt has said how much extra money there is, and everybody in the MOJ has said how huge the budgets are for the services that they've commissioned. The fact is they actually are not. I mean, I've struggled to find anybody who's delivering contracts on the dynamic framework that found it easy to make any of those budgets work. And I think that makes it difficult to collaborate because there is always that limitation. So I am hugely optimistic about things, but I'm always, please take that with a pinch of cynicism as well.
There's nothing wrong with it. And we're very positive people in the voluntary sector, but we're also rooted in reality. So, you know, that's good. Well, listen, I could actually keep the three of you to myself all afternoon and ask you questions, but I promise to share the floor with the audience. So we have some questions coming in, might be directed specifically to one or all of you, and if they're not, I might ask you all. So I'm going to call on people to ask their question. The first one is from Jackie Carpenter Devencio, and it's specifically for Hamish. So Jackie, if you ask your question, and then if anybody else has one in the chat, we can come back to that. Jackie, are you there?
Hello, thank you very much. My question is really about the partnerships. So we were one of the people who went around the Transforming Rehabilitation events, which some people may remember with some pain. We actually provide accommodation in 3 different regions. So I went to a lot of events and networked with a lot of individual organisations. And it seems like the partnerships that were established then are now kind of set in stone, and it seems quite difficult to break into them. And I would just really value your perspective on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jackie. I can probably just speak from maybe my experience rather than others. I wasn't involved in any of the partnerships for accommodation ones. If I can maybe just describe how we went about the partnerships that we created on the dynamic framework. So we bid for quite a lot of contracts as St Giles Wise across personal wellbeing and women's services. And the approach that we took was to identify the areas where we planned on hopefully bidding for. And we put a call out. Actually, Clinks were good enough to host us on one of the events. So we put a call out to ask for any organisations that were particularly interested in being involved. Curiously, it took a little bit of time to work this out, and it was a question we kept asking the Ministry of Justice, and they did eventually confirm it. We were under the belief, and it turned out we were correct, that if you qualified for each category, which we did as St Giles Wise, then we didn't need to have people in our supply chain who also qualified onto the dynamic framework, which was quite an important thing we wanted to achieve. The reason we set up St Giles Wise as an entity was we hoped to be able to bid for services and bring. We've been on the end of prime and contractor relationships in the past, and what we wanted to do with St Giles Wise was create a kind of alternative to that, where we could support smaller organisations who either didn't want to or weren't big enough to get onto the framework themselves. So the approach that we took was simply to reach out to partners, irrespective of whether they were on the framework or not, and invite them into, or see if we could work with them in a partnership. So certainly we didn't start off with particular people in mind, I guess, from that point of view. And many of the people we ended up speaking to, I don't think were on the dynamic framework kind of purposefully, I suppose.
I was going to ask that question to Josh and to Gemma as well. Gemma, not least because I know that you've been involved in quite a lot of collaboration over the years. In terms of kind of advice to Jackie from North Wales Women's Centre's younger self, how do you think newer organisations or maybe smaller organisations can get into established partnerships?
I have very mixed feelings, as you probably know. I mean, in principle, collaboration is obviously strengthens everybody, but also there's a danger that it actually can weaken the voice of the smaller partner as well. And commissioners can put small organisations particularly in a difficult position, and often force collaborations which would never work. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think each situation has to be judged on its own merits and drawbacks. Unfortunately, I think, particularly when you're as small as we are, you can just get cornered and you have big choices to make, which can be existential, so it's not easy. But, I think getting to know like-minded organisations, I suppose, is a way of at least working around this and maybe ahead of any opportunities coming along, maybe, forming partnerships and relationships in a downtime before the big bids come around the corner is probably worth doing. But it's really difficult. I mean, I know we've been under pressure from lots of corners to grow. But we don't want to grow. We actually see the value in what we are. And it's really hard when a commissioner wants you to grow to fulfill their remit. This is the thing, it's important to understand what unique service you have and why, and to value who you are and what you deliver. And I think the pressure from others can push you a little bit out of kilter. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't think there's a yes or no answer to this. I think you just have to be cautious and try and work with organisations who share your values.
So we're not actually very small, but we're in accommodation, but it seems that the accommodation partnerships are just like, well, that's NACRO nationally. And there's a kind of big regional disparity between what you get in different regions. And it often seems to boil down to individuals in particular regions who, and their attitude to it. So it can be very frustrating, but thank you very much for your thoughts.
There's very much an information piece, isn't it? Now, Josh, I'm going to come and ask you the question slightly differently in a minute, but I'm going to just do an audience shout out and see if Bev or anyone else from cohort 4 is on the call, or anyone from P3, because I know that those guys have a really interesting partnership about how the specific needs of women in the West Midlands are met by a very small and specialist organisation. So if cohort 4 are on the meeting, so if we Bev, Albert and colleagues, let us know, because I know that is a partnership that Mark Sims, the Chief Executive of P3, talks about really positively. Josh, I'm sure you're in hot demand to be a partner and collaborator because of the type of organisation you are. And I was wondering what your advice to bigger organisations and maybe established partnerships is to enable an organisation like yours to stay whole and healthy and add value and be itself and not be, big candy or added value to them, added value to the work.
Yeah, so really agree with what Hamish and Gemma have just said as well. I mean, for us, we have had quite a few approaches, and we've started developing some really interesting relationships now with some regional organisations and some national ones. And I think it goes back to it's stating the obvious, but it's something that we've really had to do, is being present, networking as much as possible, and so we can actually really understand the values of the bigger organizations and hold them to those values as well, and that's what we've done. I know that sounds really simplistic, but ultimately that's what we've done. That's what we're doing. We have a really, like lots of organizations, a really strong set of values, but I think sometimes the bigger the organization is, sometimes those values aren't consistent within the complete organization. So that's why sometimes where, you know, linking in with organizations of a similar size tends to work really, really well, because, you know, you're dealing with people that have developed those visions, developed those values. So if you can find those organizations who can live and breathe by those, like I said, by those values, they're the ones to keep hold of, and they're the ones that will want to work with you as well, opposed to, and having it on an even keel, a win-win basis, opposed to, you know, there maybe being the driving force behind it, because you both need to be, the partnership is about all partners being that driving force, and all partners being able to have their say and being able to influence change. And like I said, just to repeat, it's about matching of those values, and also
find yourself a partner, and then do
but also having that confidence to say no as well. And I don't think we do, as an industry, I don't think we do that enough. You know, if something isn't right, if we physically can't deliver something because of the funds available, and I know it's a really tough one, but we have to say no as well. And, you know, like Hamish said there about some of the commissioning partnerships and the commissioning funds, exactly the same. You know, we've spoken to so many organizations have said there's not enough money in this, but you've said yes to it. So, you know, so we have to be honest with that as well, and take up partnerships and relationships.
Such a challenge.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Gemma Robertson at the Friends of Peterborough Prison. Jen, are you there?
Yep, I am here. Thank you. My question, I think, is sort of to Hamish. How do you think that we could get government to take on some of the points that you so importantly raise about particularly the point that you raise about the value of relationships and people having supportive relationships in order to encourage them to maintain their jobs or make their sort of life more sustainable? Does that sound weird?
Would you like me to go first, Dan, or?
Go first, but I love other people's reflections as well, because relationships is such a big word, isn't it?
Thanks. Jen, no relation incidentally, but it's lovely to see another Robertson on the call. I actually think that the best way that we can get government to take on board this sort of requirements is through organisations like Klinks. I mean, Klinks as well, thank you kind of on behalf of the members just for the huge amount of work and advocacy support and advice that you've given us members over particularly the last 12 months, because it's been a particularly difficult time. But I'm not actually sure if there's much more that can be done unless they actually do take on board and listen to stuff. But we already have the channels there to inform what they need to do. It's really, I actually think the ball's entirely in their court. Hopefully people like Matt coming along here today and seeing the enthusiasm of our group will result in that.
Josh, relationships.
Yeah. So one of the relationships that we've utilised, and I think it's probably an underutilised relationship within our industry, is a relationship with the police and crime commissioners. You know, they have an unbelievable amount of influence and scope, and it's developing those relationships as well. Particularly, not to get political, but we know how many Conservative police and crime commissioners we have, so they have the ears of some really influential people upstream as well. And I think particularly in Devon and Cornwall, our police and crime commissioner and her office are extremely accessible. So I think, you know, I don't know what it's like around the country, but that is certainly an avenue which we've gone down, and we've been able to influence, you know, upstream quite a long way by the support of Alison Hernandez's office. So yeah, that's one thing we'd recommend. And I think also with
quite topical maybe to move to Gemma, because Gemma's had a change in PCC recently and used to have quite the champ, you know. Gemma, I know relationships are hugely important to the work that you do, relationships for the organisation and how you support the women that you work with to have relationships. And obviously relationships is a huge word for Klinks, and we were the Deputy Chair and Secretary of Lord Farmer's review into adult male prisoners, but also then the Secretariat for the review into the women's estate. So what do you think, what's the status of all that now, Gemma, and where do you think we go with supporting women to have the healthy relationships they need to have the path out into the future that they deserve?
Ooh, yeah, big question really. It's I suppose I would say it's about working with women from, you know, those kind of basic steps really, and around supporting women to address all the issues that they are struggling with. I mean, we've always found that really to enable women, we have to help them to be self-aware, and it starts with those building blocks. And really, I mean, we actually have a course that we call Managing Relationships, and it helps them to understand exactly how important their perceptions are and their self-awareness, because we just feel that until those building blocks are truly in place, it's really hard for them to move on to have relationships in work or colleges or anything else really. So in terms of our work with women, that is absolutely the building blocks, is helping them to feel valued, because relationships have probably been, you know, I'm preaching to the converted. Those broken relationships, I suppose, have been, you know, probably at the heart of so much of what's gone wrong in their lives. So trying to give them their self-esteem and the tools back to help them to be the person they can be, and, you know, have really good relationships with their peers is absolutely fundamental to them moving forward. So yeah, it's crucial, absolutely crucial.
Okay, we've got a minute to go. I want to give each of you 30-second wrap up, because there might have been something that you wanted to say, or might have been something in the chat that you wanted to respond to. So last word, I'm going to go around from the screen as I see it. Josh, last word.
Yeah, so for me, it's just, you know, from personally, thank you very much to Clinks, because I think their response during the pandemic was absolutely sensational. The support that we received as an organisation, and I know some other organisations as well. And we're talking about the reaction and very, very quick to get funds in so we can support the people most at need. I think that's just a massive thank you from our organisation and for me personally.
It's an absolute pleasure. Hamish, last words.
Thank you very much for inviting me along onto the panel. And as I saw some of the chats there about the, I guess, finance, benefit and debt, just a little call out. I'm very interested in speaking to any organisations who are interested in partnering up with St Giles Wise to deliver any of that. I hope I'm allowed to say that sort of thing on here, Anne.
Well, I'm not going to stop you. Gemma.
I'm going to pretty much reiterate what Josh said, really, which is just to thank Klinks for being so pivotal over the last couple of years, particularly Bryn and Jackie, who really have been a point of contact for everything. So yes, thank you so much for that. Really, really appreciated all the support.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for your time. We know your time is so precious to your service users and beneficiaries and to your teams. Thank you for bringing your experience here and for doing what you've done over the last few years so that you had that experience to bring. We know it wasn't easy. We will always be here if you need us. So folks, that wraps up day one. I just want to do a quick round of thanks to Matt Gray, our keynote speaker. And again, we will get those questions to Matt, so do keep sending them in. Our members for being our panelists, to Josh, to Gemma, and to Hamish. Our members who are facilitating the workshops over the next few days, because I won't have a chance. We're having a wrap up at the end. So Genius Within, Prison Reform Trust, GAM Care, Hibiscus Initiatives, Synergy Theatre, YNE, Prison Phoenix Trust, Working Chance and Unlock with the University of Essex, and Andy at Run for Your Life, the one-man show. Please come to workshops tomorrow and Thursday. Lots of interesting debate. There's a networking lunch tomorrow. Bring your sandwich, pasta, whatever. You can even have something really smelly and you won't offend anybody. You could have a mackerel curry. Go for it. Please don't. And bring your questions to the networking lunch. There's a yoga practice on Thursday lunchtime. And thank you so much for coming to the conference. Keep tweeting and keep staying in touch with us. and we will see you next year, no matter what. Keep being brilliant. Thank you so much to the team. Thank you to the trustees. And I want to do a personal shout out to Alison Fraser, to Patrick Williams, and to Raheel Mohammed, who are stepping down from the Clinks board because life is too busy and they're moving on into other things and staying involved. But thank you so much for all your support. And I'm going to stay on the call for a few minutes, see you all off safely off the online premises. Go to your events. Take care. Thank you. Diolch. Goodbye.